What happens when the weakest wolf in the pack is rejected by destiny itself? For Alara Ashwood, life had always been a quiet shadow at the edge of brilliance. As an Omega in the Silvercrest pack, she existed in the spaces others forgot, scrubbing floors in the Alpha's manner, keeping her eyes down, making herself smaller than she already was. The lavender and morning dew scent that clung to her skin marked her as powerless, forgettable, the lowest rank in a world ruled by strength. She'd learned early that survival meant silence, that safety lived in invisibility. But when Alpha Caden Thornridge stood before the entire pack during the Harvest Moon ceremony and severed their fated bond with a single, brutal declaration, everything changed. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. The ceremony had been flawless until that moment. Lanterns glowed like captured stars throughout the clearing, casting amber light across hundreds of gathered wolves. The scent of pine and anticipation hung thick in the autumn air. Alara had spent 3 days polishing every surface of the ceremonial grounds, her hands raw from work, never imagining she'd be anything more than part of the invisible machinery that made such events run smoothly. Then the mate pull hit her like lightning splitting an ancient tree. She'd been standing at the very edge of the gathering, holding a tray of ceremonial wine goblets, when suddenly her wolf stirred within for the first time in her life. The bond snapped into place with such force that she gasped, the tray clattering from her hands. Caden Thornridge, 6 feet 4 inches of raw dominance. His scent of forest and embers and ozone commanding the attention of every wolf present, turned toward her with eyes that glowed molten gold. For one heartbeat, time stopped. The crowd fell silent. 300 wolves watched as their alpha king stood frozen, his handsome features shifting from shock to recognition to something that looked almost like horror. The mate bond thrummed between them, a golden thread that every shifter in the clearing could sense, blazing with the moon goddess's blessing. Alara's wolf, weak, barely conscious after years of dormancy, reached for him with desperate hope. "No." Caden's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Absolutely not." The words landed like physical blows. Alara felt her knees buckle, but somehow remained standing as the Alpha King strode toward her, his Beta Marcus and several enforcers flanking him. Up close, his scent of steel and smoke overwhelmed her senses, but beneath the dominance lay something sharp and bitter, rejection already forming. "The moon goddess has made an error," Caden announced, his voice carrying across the clearing with supernatural force. "I am Alpha King of the Northern Territories. My mate will be strong, powerful, worthy of standing at my side as Luna Queen, not—" His golden eyes raked over her trembling form with unconcealed disgust. "This," whispers rippled through the crowd. Alara heard fragments. "Omega, weak, pathetic," each word another cut. She wanted to run, to disappear. But the bond held her frozen in place, her wolf whimpering at the rejection flooding through their connection. "I, Caden Thornridge, Alpha King of Silvercrest, formally reject you as my mate." His hand moved to his chest where the mark would have formed. "I sever this bond by the ancient laws. You are nothing to me." The pain came instantly. Ilara's scream tore through the night as the bond ripped apart inside her chest. It felt like her heart was being shredded with silver claws, like her soul was being torn in half. She collapsed to her knees, barely aware of the wine-soaked earth beneath her palms, her vision whiting out as agony consumed every nerve. The gathered wolves watched in silence. No one moved to help. This was pack law. A rejection was absolute, and an Omega had no right to question an Alpha King's decision. When the pain finally receded to a manageable throb, Ilara looked up through tears to find Caden already walking away. But standing beside the Alpha King was Sienna Blackthorn, a beautiful beta female whose scent of cinnamon and iron wafted across the clearing. Sienna's perfect lips curved into a victorious smile as she slipped her hand into Caden's. "Guards," Caden called without looking back. "Remove her from Packlands. The rejected have no place here." Two massive enforcers grabbed Ilara's arms, hauling her to her feet. She stumbled, her legs barely supporting her weight as they dragged her through the crowd. Faces she'd known her entire life turned away. Wolves she'd served, cleaned for, smiled at. All of them looked through her, as if she'd already ceased to exist. "Please," she whispered, though whether to the guards or the moon goddess herself, she didn't know. "Please, I have nowhere. Should have thought of that before you dared to be mated to your betters," one guard sneered, shoving her toward the pack boundary. They took her to her parents' small cottage at the edge of pack territory. Surely her family would help. Surely her mother and father. But when the cottage door opened, Ilara saw only fear in her parents' eyes. "You brought this on yourself," her mother said, her voice hollow. The scent of anxiety rolled off both parents in waves. "We warned you to never draw attention, to stay small, to survive quietly. Mother, I'm your daughter." "You were our daughter," her father's words fell like stones. "But we cannot harbor a rejected wolf. The Alpha King would strip us of what little status we have. We have your younger siblings to think of." "You're turning me out? In winter?" "I'll die." "Then you should have been more careful," her mother whispered, and closed the door. The guards dumped Ilara at the pack boundary marker, a line of ancient stones that glowed faintly with territorial magic. Beyond lay the wilderness, miles of forest and mountain, where winter had already begun its brutal reign. Storm clouds gathered overhead, heavy with the promise of snow. "You cross this line. You're rogue," the lead guard warned. "No pack will take you. But stay here, and the Alpha will have you executed for trespassing come morning. Your choice." They left her there, shivering in the thin servant's dress she'd worn to the ceremony. Ilara looked back at the only home she'd ever known, the warm lights of the pack houses, smoke rising from chimneys. The distant sound of the celebration resuming now that the unpleasant business was concluded. A wave of power washed over her as she crossed the boundary. The pack bonds, already damaged by rejection, severed completely. She felt utterly alone for the first time in her life, cut off from the collective consciousness that had always hummed quietly in the back of her mind. The first snowflakes began to fall as Ilara stumbled into the wild forest beyond pack lands. She walked until her feet bled, until the celebration sounds faded to nothing, until the trees grew so thick that even the moonlight couldn't penetrate. The temperature plummeted. Her thin dress offered no protection against the wind that cut through the forest like knives of ice. The scent of pine and frozen earth surrounded her, beautiful and deadly. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time lost meaning as Ilara wandered deeper into territory, where no pack claimed dominion. Her lips turned blue. Her fingers went numb. The pain in her chest from the severed bond remained constant, a hollow ache that made breathing feel impossible. When she finally collapsed, it was beside the ruins of an old stone structure, perhaps a shepherd's shelter from generations past. 3 walls remained standing, offering minimal protection from the wind. Snow fell heavier now, covering the ground in white that would soon become her burial shroud. Ilara crawled into the shelter and curled into herself, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her body. Her wolf had gone silent, retreating so deep inside that she couldn't feel its presence at all. Perhaps it had already died, killed by the rejection. Perhaps she was dying too. "This is it," she whispered to the empty forest. The words crystallized in the freezing air. "I'm sorry, Moon Goddess. I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry." Her eyes drifted closed. She thought she should feel afraid, but instead only numbness remained. Cold, complete, almost peaceful. At least the pain would end. At least she wouldn't have to remember Caden's disgusted expression, or Sienna's triumphant smile, or her parents closing the door in her face. At least she wouldn't have to be weak anymore. Consciousness slipped away like water through cupped hands.